and some suggestions to make the process a lot easier. First, the names that you create for controls must begin with a letter. They have to be all one word, that is, no spaces embedded within the name themselves. You also need to avoid special symbols. One special symbol that is permissible is the underscore. You also will want to use camel casing. The camel casing is not a requirement of the Visual Basic Language, but it is an industry standard that you should get used to using. You see on the screen some examples of camel casing. For example, message label. The word is spelled in all lowercase with the exception of the first L in label. Another example is exit button. All lowercase, capital B button is the only exception, and so forth. We'll now take a look at some examples of controls being renamed within the Visual Basic environment. I've created a little program here, or a real form, that simply shows some controls with some sample names. Whenever you place a control on the form, by default it is given a name. For example, a button, the first button that's on a form, is by default called button 1. You can always determine that by looking in the properties window. The properties window can be sorted alphabetically or by category. I prefer to use the alphabetical list. Above the beginning of the alphabetical list is the name property, and there you will see button 1. That is the default name for the control. Now, when you're creating applications, you will want to create meaningful and descriptive names for your controls so that when you reference these in code, they will have an automatic meaning. For example, if a button's job is to calculate, you might want to call it calculate button. So to rename this button 1, calculate button, I simply go to the name property, and over top of button 1 simply type in camel casing format calculate button. No spaces, all one word. Once that's done, the button on the form has been renamed to calculate button. Again, you can confirm this by clicking on the button and then looking at the name property. Likewise, for a checkbox, its default name is checkbox 1. If I wanted to rename a checkbox, for example, maybe the user is supposed to check the checkbox if they're a new user, then I might call it new user checkbox. So again, in camel casing, I simply type new user checkbox. Now notice in all these examples that the name of the control is also embedded as part of the name of the control itself. For example, a checkbox has the word checkbox in the name. For example, the label has the name label. If a label's purpose is to display the results of a calculation, for example, then an appropriate name might be called display results label. A text box might be referred to as first name text box. Again, the word text box is embedded as part of the name, so that when you reference this in code, you know immediately first what is the purpose of the control, and also what type of control is it. That is it a text box, is it a label, what have you. And the last example given here is the items combo box. We'll talk later about combo boxes, but a combo box allows you to keep a list. So if you had a list of items, you might call it items combo box. Again, all these examples use camel casing, all one word, no spaces. It is important when you're designing your applications to create meaningful and specific names for your controls. In the long run, it will make your programs easier to read, easier to work with, and easier to modify. One final comment about controls. If a control is never going to be referenced in code, then it's okay to use the default name as its name. But if a control is going to be referenced in code in any way, it is always best to create a new name for that control so that anyone reading the code knows exactly what that control is and what it is referencing.